at the end of the day, I'm probably going to make more money on those deals overall. But when I invest in mortgage notes and I can get a 10% return on that and I can get paid today and that money's coming in every single month, it is nice and it just makes it a little bit easier. So I think as I continue to invest, I think maybe every 3 out of 4 deals are going to be cash flow, and then do that one equity play. But again, I like to get my money coming back to me as quickly as possible. So that self storage deal, where yeah, I'm probably going to make the most amount of money. It's just going to be quite a while.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Path to Passive. In this episode, I get a chance to talk to Trevor Oldham, who is the CEO of Podcasting You, which is a podcast booking agency which is focused on booking guests that are for alternate investment companies such as, like multifamily, self-storage, private equity, debt funds, hedge funds, and has even worked with other companies like wine and whiskey investing companies too. So quite a different array. It's pretty cool. I think it was over 6,500 guest bookings, if I remember that correctly, in over 400 different types of companies. So really cool, really awesome stuff that he's doing for the industry, working with people. He is an investor himself. We break that down a little bit on how he's made his decisions, how he's been building his portfolio, and also where he got started and how he's made the most from where he's come from to, latch on to courses, podcasts, and other types of resources as well to get him started to continue to really snowball and compound that information over time. As usual, I like to ask guests that come on with their experience, what would they tell others or tell themselves really when they first started. So it's always cool to hear about what that is as well. So stay tuned for that one. If this brings you value, as always, please go ahead, please like, subscribe, add a comment, or feel free to reach out to me and connect on LinkedIn as well. And of course, please do so for Trevor. You can find his information in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy. My next guest here is not only an investor himself in different commercial classes, but he's the CEO of Podcasting You, a podcast booking agency for alternate investment companies, has worked with over 400 real estate and wealth investors and over 6,500 interviews booked. Trevor, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for being here. For those who don't know you, tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got here today.
Yeah, most certainly. And thanks, Stephen, for inviting me on the show today. Hopefully, provide some value to your audience. In long story short, is I'd always been an entrepreneur, starting off different companies, and I think it came from reading this book, and I forget exactly what it was, but I bought it on Amazon, and it was listing the differences between basically the middle class and the upper class. The big difference between the two is that usually folks in the upper class, if they don't have a high-paying gig, they've gone off and started their own business, being a business owner. Obviously, that can vary depending on the type of business that you start, but that really got my start into entrepreneurship. I was buying phone cases from China and reselling them. That didn't work out too well. They were all knockoffs, so they all got returned on eBay. I should have known when I bought like 30 phone cases for $50, but nonetheless, continued on. I was buying and selling bracelets from China. They didn't have a brand, and I grew that company. And I was still in high school. I believe I was a freshman. And that company was started as a senior in high school, ran it as a freshman in college before I realized I didn't really enjoy it. I honestly felt kind of bad selling these products because I would buy them for 10 cents a bracelet, maybe $1 a watch, and I knew the quality wasn't good. And just mentally, I had a hard time shipping them out to people. And that eventually led me to my next company, Become the Lion. With long story short on that company is I had started a podcast. And it was with that podcast, I was booking guests, I was editing the show, I was creating the social media snippets, I was doing the recap blogs of the episodes, basically everything on my own. Did that for about 2 years and just decided I wanted to do something different. I'd been running that company with a partner, and our personalities weren't matching. So what I ended up doing was just freelancing out my skills. I just used Upwork, and I was finding freelance gigs doing exactly what I had just talked about. And in 2017, I was a junior in college, so I was picking up all these freelance gigs might have even been in 2017, a sophomore in college, depending on when we looked at it. But was picking up these freelance gigs and was finding people that want to get booked on podcasts, needed guests for their podcast, needed editing their show. And after about a year of doing that, I realized like this could actually be a real company. And I gravitated more towards booking people on podcasts because I realized I could bill someone $50 an hour to edit their podcast, but it's going to take an hour to edit their podcast. Or I could bill someone $50 to get them booked on a podcast, and it could take me 15 minutes. So that makes more sense for me to spend my time there. And that company's just really grown and evolved over the last couple of years. Where you mentioned today, we really work with alternative investment companies. I love the space. I love being a passive investor myself. And it came to a point in time where I'd be on sales calls and people would be like, "What differentiates your company from the other 8 other podcast booking agencies?" That's what we would call ourselves. And I don't know. I mean, we get you booked on podcasts. We create a one sheet. We book your interviews for you. And there was like, what is differentiating us versus them? I was like, okay, I really got to niche down. There's been some companies that have been in it a little bit longer, and I loved working with real estate investors. One, I liked real estate myself. Two, they always had the money to pay us, and they wouldn't. Not that they don't complain or you get those clients, but when you get a new entrepreneur and they don't have a ton of budget, when they invest $500 with our company, it's like their last $500, and you're going to hear a lot more from that client versus the real estate investor that has a billion in assets. I never hear from them at all. So really just like the real estate space, and have been growing that company since 2017. And then now we're a small company. I believe there's 5 of us total, all in the US for the most part. And just, yeah, just like to stay small. And I'd rather be a smaller company than grow it to like 100 employees and grow X amount of revenue. Just stay small and nimble, and continue to grow slowly as a company over the last couple of years.
Yeah, awesome, man. A lot of nuggets there. I was thinking about as you were talking about that, and I totally agree. Right, it's kind of taking your own life and your own destiny, right? Like you were talking about reading that book, whichever one it was, about those that we'll call it middle and upper, but it's really that those that want to get a lot more out of life, right? Whatever that might look like. And like I said, taking your life in your own in your own hands, creating your own destiny, kind of thing. I you have to play an active part for sure, and that's there. As much as we like to say that too, even on the limited partner side, which I'm curious to hear a little more about your experience too. It's like there are parts where even though it's passive in a lot of perspectives, you should take an active role in
Mhm.
some sense to make sure that you're tracking things and so forth. So interesting. You hear that you did the sort of ecom, the arbitrage thing too, and was that like on FBA or eBay or like something else?
So I just had my own website on there, so I was just running it through Shopify, and just
Okay.
working with these different influencers that are out there. I mean, it was simple. I mean, I could ship them a bracelet in the mail, and they have 10K followers, and I'd say, hey, I'd give it to you for free, and whatever the cost of postage was back then, $4 or $5 plus a dollar or two for the bracelet. So it grew. But yeah, in the back of my mind, I always just felt so bad about shipping them out. I was like, the quality on these isn't good. I mean, we were selling a lot, but yeah, I just felt bad at the end of the day.
But you learned a ton of lessons that translated,
Mhm.
right? About working with others, influencing marketing, understanding the whole supply chain as well. And, really in a lot of ways, sales and creating revenue, which, in a way you have the right vehicle, which it sounds like you do now with the company, podcasting, how you can provide value, right? Provide value to the alternate investing space. And give us some ideas here. What are some of these different companies that you're talking about so that people can get a grasp of the types of people you work with?
Yeah, so our primarily it might be like multifamily investing companies, so people that are raising capital to invest in apartment complexes. We work with a ton of self storage, mobile home park investment companies, oil and gas. We work with a decent amount of CPAs and attorneys for
Hmm.
investors because they obviously want to go off and get on podcasts. If you're a CPA or attorney, because who's your ideal clientele? It's going to be a real estate investor, but really anyone that's raising capital primarily in the real estate space. But I know I did mention oil and gas. We've had folks raise money to buy laundry mats, to buy ATMs, to do car washes, to and even invest in barrels of whiskey. That was probably the most unique one where that investment was about, I think the minimum was like 50 or 100K on that. And that was our pretty standard client. Most clients that are raising capital, their minimum was 50K, 100K. Occasionally they might find 25K, but that's typically here or there. Usually their deals are going to be 506C. So you're going to be looking at accredited deals, because if they're going out there on these podcasts and they're talking about their deals, it has to be 506C. It can't be 506B. And if your audience is unsure what that means, basically 506C is for accredited investors, 506B is for non accredited investors. So that's someone like myself, where I have to find the deal on my own and I have to contact the operator or the sponsor on my own. They can't advertise to me just based on SEC guidelines and making sure that they don't get sued or in trouble. And there's just those guidelines protected there. So, typical client is going to be an investor that's raising capital, and their deals are for accredited investors only. Again, occasionally we might have someone that does 506B, but it's kind of like trying to do it with one hand behind tied behind your back, because you can talk about what you do, but you can't talk about deal specific deals that you have coming out. So it just makes it a little bit harder. But yeah, I think we've worked with probably pretty much every single niche within the real estate space. And then even going into like, you have your whole life insurance folks, your infinite banking people as well. Those clients are a little bit harder to work with. Not that they're like hard to deal with as a client. It's more getting them booked on podcasts, where people I find are either very into the infinite banking aspect the whole life, or they're very against it. And it's either one. It's almost like looking at politics, where people are either like on one side or the other. But again, we enjoy working with those clients. So really anything that has to do with building wealth, raising capital, that's really who we've gravitated towards.
Got it. Yeah, like you said, multifamily, anything commercial, self-storage, mobile home park, land notes. Interesting
Mhm.
about the insurance providers as well, and service providers, oil and gas. I saw on your site you also have those like hedge funds and venture cap, some private debt funds, the whiskey and wine investment companies. I know some people that have raised capital for buying barrels of whiskey too, so that's kind of cool. And I see self-directed as well as cost seg experts. So cool, wide variety of different people, and you certainly get a lot of exposure. I mean, there's of these categories over 6,500 guest bookings done already. So makes a lot of sense. I did want to go back to one of the original things you were talking about there, which was that book, right? And that book, it seemed like it had a pretty big impact, whatever the book was. But would you say that like reading that book and getting that knowledge is something that kind of was part of your origin story, so to speak, to think, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to like learn and do things on my own? Or did you come from a certain family? Were there other experiences that also attributed to that? Sort of curious where the fire in your belly started, so to speak.
Yeah, I think just growing up, I was always wanting to go out there and make money on my own. So I'd try to mow people's yards. I would try to buy and sell baseball cards on eBay just to make more money. I would go into local retail stores and try to buy like thrift shops, try to buy clothing and resell it online. So I think I always had that knack for entrepreneurship and going out there and trying to make money on my own. But I never knew that it was called entrepreneurship. It was, hey, I want to mow people's yards and I want to get paid money on my own time without necessarily having a job. And that was more so, I mean, when you're 13, 14 years old, there's not that many high paying jobs. So if I can go mow someone's yard for $40 and it takes me an hour or two, that's definitely good money. So I think it was just always in me. And then when I read that book, it was almost like that light bulb moment went off. I was like, oh, this is actually, there's a name to it called entrepreneurship. And there's people going out there and building these businesses, because I never really thought about it on my own. My dad had started a business at one point for a little bit, and then he ended up switching careers after having a fallout with his partner as well within his business. So he had done his own business for a few years there. I think that definitely helped as well, just seeing that impact. I think my brother had always had his entrepreneurial spirit as well, where he would start little businesses here and there. So I think it was just part of the family. But again, reading that book, it just made it all click. And even thinking back to the book, it was like maybe 50 pages. It was probably like a ghost writer, where you hire someone on Upwork for 50 to $100 to write it, and then you throw it up on Amazon, because it was like paper. It was almost
Yeah.
like getting a booklet in the mail. Like looking at it now, and I'm assuming AI can even make that process even quicker. But it probably wasn't the best book, but when it did explain building businesses, that just, yeah, that just sent me down the path of entrepreneurship. And then up until that point, I really hadn't read that many books. And then all of a sudden, I just started trying to read as many books as I could, listen to as many podcasts as I could, and then just really focus on growing and trying to build a business from there because again, I was still trying to figure my way around. And it was actually at a point in time when I was going to college and went to what you would call a commuter school. So there'd be people there all during the week, but on the weekends, everyone would go home. But
Mm.
I was about an hour and a half from home and they didn't allow cars for freshmen. So my parents wouldn't want to come pick me up every weekend. They would maybe come once a month to bring me home just to get off campus. And I would just be reading books. I would be listening to podcasts. I believe I would sign up on Udemy and I would just be taking online courses like how to run Google ads, how to run Facebook ads, how to build a website on WordPress. Cause I was bootstrapping everything. I've bootstrapped developing sites on WordPress, on Wix, on Squarespace, on Shopify, because I didn't necessarily have a ton of money. So I was just spending all that free time either using like YouTube or again using like Udemy where they'd have deals and I'd buy all these courses for $10 a piece and just trying to learn as much as I could. So I think it was just all of that compiled into one, just really helped me grow and really helped me build this business as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Udemy is I still use that today. That's kind of one of those OGs, right? It's
Mhm,
like been
yeah.
around for a while. Probably 10 years at this point. I mean, as OGs you're of the next wave of courses and stuff. But mowing lawns, et cetera. It's one of those things where, a quote from me always comes to mind. It's you get paid for what you do, like your time or your task, then paid for what you know, and then paid for who you are as you build
Mhm.
brand and kind of go up that ladder, so to speak. And it's up leveling to that next step, which really makes the difference, which sound like you really invested a lot of time in, especially the commuting, and wherever you were. So way to turn that time into an asset. Love that. So you said you had a brother. Are you younger of the two? Do you have many? Is it
Yeah,
just one other brother?
younger brother and I have a sister as well, so they're both older and they're older by 7, 8 years, so they're
Oh wow.
considerably so they're decently older. It's not like we're close relationship wise, but when it comes to age wise, they're definitely a little bit older.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, I was curious. I've got three older brothers myself. I'm the youngest. Got it. Okay, so there were some businesses that were kind of started around you. You got to see it, especially you're talking about your brother's one, your dad one. So, and plus with a little bit of the age gap there with at least your siblings, you got to see some of the things that were happening. It's kind of the benefit of of being the youngest too in a lot of ways, but that's super cool. So kind of kicked off your journey, kind of gave you the bug as well. I'm curious, where did the interest for real estate come into? Because you have this niche of alternate companies, right? Investing companies, like we just talked about. But where did the interest for real estate come in?
Yeah, I think it sort of starts off like a lot of people. And my business partner at Become the Line, he had started his own successful company on Amazon. It was pretty cool. He was selling like electric wine openers. So he had started that. I had started that bracelet and watch company, and we were always just bouncing ideas off each other. But he had been doing it a little bit longer, so more or less looked at him like a mentor. And he was reading a ton of books, and I said, "Do you have any recommendations?" And he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, like a lot of folks that start off in real estate. It's kind of cliche, but it was really just reading that book. But I never thought I could necessarily go out and buy real estate at that point in time where I don't know, I was 18, 19 years old reading that book. But I had that interest in real estate. I'd gone off and during when I was in college, I was home one semester and in Massachusetts at that time. Now I'm in New York, but I could take a 40-hour course on real estate to get your real estate license as an agent. So went through and did that when I was home on break, went, took the test, got my license. Thought that might help me buy real estate, but that doesn't necessarily that doesn't do much for you. Like I could tell you how far a carbon monoxide detector has to be from each doorway, but that's not gonna help you. I mean, maybe from a building inspector, but not when it comes to buying real estate. So I think that interest was always there of building up passive income streams, but I think it was just putting it on the back burner for a long time, thinking that if I want to go off and buy, let's say an apartment complex, let's say make it simple, it's 20 units, it's going to be $1 million, so maybe 50K a door. That'd be a steal, at least where I am right now. Maybe that might be a little, maybe a class D property, but nonetheless, just for just for simple math, let's just say it's $1 million property. I have to raise 200K, or I have to put down 20%. So maybe I'm putting down that 200K into it, plus whatever closing costs and other fees that may happen, not even having a CapEx budget. All of a sudden, the number starts to add up. Maybe it's 250 that I need. I'm like, I don't necessarily have that much money right now. So I think I always just put it on the back burner and had it in the back of my mind. I want to invest in real estate someday. But then that's where I came across the passive investment community, where I learned I could put 50K into a deal and get started that way. So I think I always just had that interest in investing in real estate and generating the passive income. And there's that quote where it's a high percentage of folks that are wealthy invest in real estate. I might say like 90%. I don't know how accurate that is, but there's enough people out there that have become very wealthy through real estate. So I think it was always just having that interest. And then it just made sense with my company, where I love talking real estate. I love learning about it. And then now all of a sudden I'm picking up these clients in real estate and I get to talk to them about it. I get to figure out how they've built their company. So it just honestly just blended really well, where I have this interest in real estate and then I have these clients in real estate. So why not do it? And then I want to invest in real estate myself. So it was almost like the best of both worlds of trying to blend everything.
Got it. Couple follow-ups in that pretty cool journey, and I can't tell you how many people, including myself, probably right around I think I was right around 17, 18 as well, believe it or not, when I had first read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that's a whole other story. I was fortunate enough to meet Robert Kiyosaki a couple years ago. Why, $50,000 chunks passive income is a whole lot different than going to do a single family home, right? Especially, I don't know, you're in New York now, you're in Massachusetts before, there's different markets all over the place where you could put down 20%, I don't know, for two, three, 400, we'll call it a medium, a middle ground, $300,000 house. Why did you skip single family homes? Is basically my question.
Yeah, for me, honestly, I felt as though I would have a hard time being a landlord. I think that I would have a hard time kicking people out if they weren't paying their rent, and that was part of it too. Never owning a house. Me and my wife, we own a house now, but never owning a house, I'm not too handy per se. So that was always my worry: was if I buy this single family rental, I rent it out, what happens if there's a problem? And you hear the horror stories of tenants calling you up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I was like, I don't necessarily want to deal with that. I just don't want to deal with that. I have enough going on between my business, my wife and I were getting married, and of course now we have a daughter. There was just a lot going on. And I was like, I just don't want to take that on. I just almost like felt like uncomfortable and scared going out and buying a single family rental, where for me I find it's just a lot easier to vet deals, to vet sponsors and operators, and then plus I never have to deal with the tenants myself. I never have to talk to them. I never have to deal with any of the emergencies. But obviously there's a very active part of passive investing where I'm not going to just blindly invest 50K with an operator or a sponsor. But I think that was why I jumped into it, where I'd owned my own home and I was like, do I want to go active or do I want to go passive? I know probably I would make more money being active, but is it worth the extra headache? Is it worth the extra couple percentage points that I'm going to be making on the active side? Because where I am, the numbers make sense in New York. So I'm in upstate New York, about 2 hours north of the city. So I could go off and buy a 200,000 4 unit and get $4,000 a month in rent. So the numbers make sense where I am, but it's like, do I want to deal with the tenants? Do I want to deal with those headaches? And for me right now, it's like, no, I don't necessarily want to do that. I'd rather just passively invest in these deals, make a little bit less of a return than I would, but I don't have to deal with any of that. I never worry about it. I mean, hopefully, I mean, you have to worry if there's going to be capital calls or there's actual issues with the property, but for the most part, I don't. As long as I vet the sponsor and operator, I feel pretty comfortable putting my money there. Where I'm not going to necessarily have to worry about the deal as if I was going off and doing it on my own.
Got it. So you're basically looking at the amount of things that you had going on for your own life, and you were evaluating from getting married to having a daughter. Congratulations, by the way. And it sounds like possibly freshly moved or were moving to upstate New
Mhm.
York from somewhere like Massachusetts as well. So you had things going on, right? And so where if you were to get a single family home, would it be nearby you or would it be further away? And even if it were closer, you'd have to do all this work anyway, and it would kind of distract the focus. Is that about like the big picture?
Yeah, yep, that's spot on. So if I were to get a single family, I would probably just get it somewhere nearby again because the deals just they make sense. In Massachusetts, where I was, they did not make sense. And I looked at a lot of deals in Massachusetts because me and my wife were debating whether we wanted to live there, where my family is, or live where we are now, where her family is. And yeah, the numbers just would not. To give you like example, I would look at 3 units and the monthly rent on it or the monthly mortgage payment on it would be like 3,700 a month, and the income that you'd get coming in would be $3,500 a month. So you'd have a $200 buffer, but like that's not even counting like capex or vacancy. So the numbers just made
Emergencies,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. The numbers just made zero sense in that particular market. But yeah, if I were to go so a part of me wants to look into doing more like an Airbnb and doing it as like a vacation house, like somewhere warm, like South Carolina or Florida, Georgia, somewhere where I can go a little further south than New York in the winter, where it's going to be a little bit warmer, and
Nice
maybe
and
I
cold.
rent it out on Airbnb. Yeah, exactly. Rent it out on Airbnb for 50 weeks a year. So that's something I have considered, but haven't done too much due diligence on that. So I think if I was going to go down one route, I would want to go more the vacation house route where I'm buying a property in a different state and then having someone else manage it and looking into all of that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm just kind of diving into it because I was sort of really curious, right? Like, I didn't really, I bought one of my first properties, oh god, 8 years ago, and it wasn't until doing some single family home stuff for a little bit did I really like, the sky part, and I'm like, oh, commercial, like I can do that. So, like, it took time, and so, you know, if I were smarter back in the day, I suppose I would have evaluated and not let, I mean, I'll call it what it is, and maybe easier hindsight looking backward, like the limiting beliefs of could I do this or not versus look across the entire board and look at, well, how do they do it in commercial as well versus just think, oh, I couldn't do this yet because I had to do more single family and quote unquote get there and get the skills. So, that in mind, I'm sort of curious, like, what was the bridge for you from, like not wanting to do single family home for all those reasons and being the landlord, et cetera, is one thing, but but discovering that you could also be a passive investor is another story. So how did you find out about that?
So I would say I was working with a business coach at the time, and I told him that I would be interested in investing in real estate at some point. And he was like, "Well, you have all these real estate clients. Why don't you look to invest with them?" And
Ah,
sort of
you
like
had
a
them
light.
already.
What was that?
So you're working with these clients already then.
Yep, exactly. So it was like, I don't know, I never thought about investing with them before. I don't know. I was almost like, why did I never think of that? It was almost like I've been working with these clients for years, but I had never considered it. So I started just talking to my clients about the deals that they had, but I was very fresh, very green when it came to it. I had no idea about the differences between 506C deal, which I talked about accredited only, or 506B, which is
Mhm.
accredited and non-accredited, can both invest in that deal. And I think for me, it was just going through bigger pockets, reading the forums. It was I joined a community called Left Field Investors. They actually recently got bought out by bigger pockets. I believe it's called Passive Pockets
Yeah, I saw
now.
that.
So I was a part of that community. I was on LinkedIn. There's a ton of networking opportunities for folks in the real estate space. A lot of them are capital raisers, which is sometimes it's like blood in the water when I join them and I tell them I'm interested in investing in real estate and they all want to talk to you. But it was
For
a
sure.
great experience being able to meet these different capital raisers and these operators that would join these groups. And then I made it a mission of twofold. One, I would try to talk to at least 3 new operators a week. And I did that for about 6 months, whether or not I wanted to invest with them, because I wanted to get a good understanding who's a good operator, what asset class do I want to invest in, what do I like, what don't I like, before I even invested with them. Because I could talk to one operator for the very first time and they sound great, but then maybe I talk to 5 more and I realize this particular one isn't as good as I thought they were. And then the other aspect of it was underwriting deals on my own. So I bought like an underwriting course, and not that I wanted to spend hours a day on it, but I would use Marcus and Millichap's website, and they have deals listed all the time. And I would basically download the documents, and I would try to underwrite the deals that they had for sale myself. And then I'd say, oh, I'd buy this deal, or no, I wouldn't buy this deal on my own. And I'd maybe spend 10 to 30 minutes a day doing that and just getting that practice. I don't know if it was the best practice. I got a lot of calls from Marcus and Millichap brokers every single week, but it was good enough just because I was like, how do I find a lot of these deals? I mean, maybe I could have used LoopNet to find some of these deals and to look at the financials. But yeah, that's really what I had done, was just talking to sponsors, vetting these deals, and then just getting a good understanding of what asset classes I want to go into, and then what I'm looking to do. And I would say part of it too is me. I'm running this podcasting company and investing in 401k and IRA, and I I like doing that. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to be running this podcasting company forever. I want to be able to retire at some point in, not that I won't have the option, but I don't want to have to wait till I'm whatever 59 and a half, whatever rules stipulate by the government that you can't be taking your money out. What happens if I want to retire at 55 or 50
Mhm.
or say even 45, and now my money's locked up for another 15 years in these retirement accounts, which they each have their benefits. I know people like them, some people don't like them, but let's just say they're there for a reason. They help people to invest. And when I started looking at real estate, I was like, well, if I invest 50K a year and get, I believe it was an 8% return just on that, pretty standard, pretty simple return on that money per year, I'm going to have enough income coming in to cover all my monthly expenses within 7 years. Not that it's going to be enough to go on vacation, but enough to cover the mortgage and the utilities and the food and daycare and everything like that. And I was like, wow, 7 years sounds a lot better to reach my financial freedom than having to wait till I'm necessarily 60 and having to wait like 33 years to get there. So I think it was like that light bulb moment. It was like, oh, well, and a lot of these deals that I could find, they would give me 8%, depending on whether it's more of a cash flow deal or whether it's more of an equity deal. But yeah, that's really how I started that process, was realizing I don't want to wait forever. And then just taking that time to talk to all these sponsors and operators that are out there. And yeah, I was like definitely uncomfortable. I would hop on a call with them and they'd be like, "What questions do you have for me?" I'm like, "I don't know. What questions should I be asking you?" And you just build that out over time. And I think that was just forcing myself to talk to these three operators per week. And then I set a deadline goal for myself, was I want to get into that first deal of in January, I believe it was 23. And then I ended up getting to my first deal of December 22, and I think that was just because I had the capital, but I could still get 100% the bonus depreciation versus 80% if I invested in January. So I was like, might as well do it in December versus January. So I think setting that goal for myself as well, and just having someone hold me accountable. And I had one of these real estate people in one of these groups that I met that was also a passive investor. He would text me about once every other week, "Hey, how's it going? Are you getting ready to invest?" And I think just having that accountability was beneficial as well.
Yeah, super cool. A lot there to unpack. Certainly, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me was, many listeners are thinking about, where do they go to even talk to these people to invest with, right? You're talking about those, whatever they're called now, the left field group. Is one thing to join one of those groups, but then you also talked about to go on LinkedIn, and there was people there too. I knowing what I know now, I see all of the people that are on there on LinkedIn. But from your perspective, let me ask the question of, would you, for someone else that wants to go talk to two or three sponsors, or people like p- operators to go and have these conversations with, is LinkedIn groups a good place for that, to go and find them and reach out to?
Oh yeah, most certainly. I would find that it's almost like if you just search like in the search bar like real estate syndication, real estate syndicator, that's what they're going to typically be called. You might have the real estate investor, but who knows if they're raising capital or not,
Mhm.
or putting deals together. They might just be doing a couple, say, single family rentals on their own. But yeah, LinkedIn was very key for me in learning and growing. And I would do like two or three of these groups a week, and they would meet for a half an hour, an hour. Eventually, I stopped going to them because there's like the same people going to them all the time, and you get familiar with everyone
Or
that's there. And
were they like meetups or something like that,
yep,
based in LinkedIn?
exactly.
Oh,
Yep,
okay, okay,
yep.
okay,
They're
got it.
like virtual Zoom meetups. So I haven't been on one in a while, but I believe you would hop on. There might be, say, 20 people. There do breakout rooms, maybe three or four of you go into a room for 10 minutes. At the end of those 10 minutes, then we break out into another room, break out into another room. Maybe the last
Mixers.
10 to 15 minutes, everyone goes around and shares what they do and who they can help. And then that way, like, even if I didn't speak to someone, someone might say, I invest in mobile home parks in Alabama. Like, oh, that sounds like an interesting asset class. I'm going to connect with them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot them a message. Hey, was in this group, heard you. Can we hop on a quick call? And I don't think anyone's ever said no. I don't want to hop on a call with you, especially if they're raising capital. No one's going to say no to that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is such a good point that, you know, there's kind of two parts there. One, even if they're not looking to raise capital, people in real estate, they want to talk to other people in real estate. And so if you have any interest, they're going to jump on the call with you. And I, really commend you for the taking action aspect of just going and asking a bunch of questions, because, some people are afraid or concerned about, what if I go and I, look like I don't know anything? Well, that's how you start.
Mhm.
You start by not knowing anything. So, absolutely. And then, I love what you were talking about of going and just pulling off pro formas and D12s and whatever else from Marcus and
Mhm.
Millichap. Anyone who doesn't know Marcus Millichap, they're a big brokerage house. They, are a buyer, sellers for brokerages for these multifamily properties, and some others as well, asset classes. But I just think that's so funny, Trevor. You went there, and you have to do the non-disclosure thing. You have to put in your information,
Mhm.
right, to go and pull those things down. Where did you get the education for doing the underwriting? Was that was that on Udemy, or was that through left field? They had some stuff there. Where did you originally get that?
Yeah, so it was actually through Michael Blanc or Michael Blank, however you.
Blanc.
I think his
Okay.
last name is pronounced Michael Blanc,
Yeah.
but it's interesting for those listening because it's spelled BLANK. So you think it's gonna be blank, but it's
Right.
pronounced Michael Blanc. And he had an underwriting deal. He had an underwriting course, and I just bought that. I think it was like $97, and you got this free spreadsheet. So he had the spreadsheet all put together, and I would just go on and I would tweak it depending on the asset class that I was looking at. But in the beginning, I was just looking at a ton of multifamily, so it just made it super simple. So it was worth at that time the $97 to buy it, get access to his spreadsheet, and he would walk you through like where to put what numbers in. And he had like a very simple one where I forget the exact metrics, but you just plug in these two metrics and it would tell you what the purchase price should be. So if the
Hmm.
purchase price was
NOI
a
cap rate.
million, yep, exactly. If the
Yeah.
purchase price was $1 million off, then I'd be like, what's going on with this deal? Sometimes it would be very close to it, and I wouldn't look into it that much further. But yeah, I would just be analyzing the documents that were given to me.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah. But you'll also you invested in a couple other asset classes as well. You're talking about hearing those things for self storage. I saw that you did a triple net, right? NNN, and I think
Mhm.
there was one other that you were also in. So you've got notes investing, mortgage notes investing as well. So notes, definitely interesting. So self storage, triple N, like was that like a strip mall or something?
So it's gonna be like your Dollar General, Family
Okay.
Dollar type buildings, and then
Yeah.
also a vet office was lumped into it. So it was a basically a fund model where I think there's like 5 properties in it. I think it's like 2 Dollar Generals, 2 Family Dollars, and then a vet office, all, lumped into this one particular deal.
Got it. Cool. And mortgage notes. So, you're talking about sort of your own investment thesis, your own strategy and plan, if you will, of it's a whole lot better to make one investment of 50,000 per year and for the next 7 years or whatever it ends up being for you versus waiting the 30 years, right? Because that money
Mhm.
compounds over time for sure. And that 8% is like cash on cash versus, IRR, internal rate of return, which, that and your multiple of number on your return are different metrics to look at. I've got some episodes out on that too, including the 506B, 506C. But your thesis around making one investment per year is your primary thing that you're investing for cash flow.
Yep, so I'd say right now it's cash flow. I've done 2 equity deals, and they've been fine, but there's no distributions on them. So one's a multifamily deal. Luckily, no capital calls, no pauses and distributions, but been in that for about 2 years now, and that's just been I think we get 4.5%. At least we get paid out monthly, so it's not quarterly. I also like to look for monthly just to make it that's just my preference. I prefer monthly over quarterly distributions. And then the self storage deal, that one's probably going to be the best return on my money. It's probably going to be a 3x equity multiple over 5 years. But
Oh.
that's one where it's going to take about 3 years to get any sort of distribution, where it's a development deal where the units on the property, they were like 150% below market rent. And then they're developing new units on top of those. So once they raise rents, I knew it was going to be profitable, but now it's just waiting in time for them to develop all of these new storage units. And it was like it was a fund with three different properties in it. I believe two in Indiana, and then maybe one in Delaware. But those are nice. Where I'm probably at the end of the day, I'm probably going to make more money on those deals overall. But when I invest in mortgage notes and I can get a 10% return on that, and I can get paid today, and that money's coming in every single month,
Mhm.
it is nice, and it just makes it a little bit easier. So I think as I continue to invest, I think maybe every 3 out of 4 deals are gonna be cash flow, and then do that one equity play. But again, I like to get my money coming back to me as quickly as possible. So that self-storage deal where, yeah, I'm probably gonna make the most amount of money, it's just gonna be quite a while to get any distribution. I think it's and that's sometimes hard for, I think, people that are investing for the very first time. When I first started doing it, I did the mortgage notes and was getting a return the very or let's say the next month after I invested with that deal, whatever the money got processed through them. Where if I was someone newer and I was investing in a deal, I would have a hard time waiting 2 or 3 years to see any return of capital. That would be my preference. I think that when you're investing in a deal, you want to start to see it coming back quickly, especially early on in the beginning, just to make sure that's it's real and everything that they say what the person says they're going to do, they're going to do. But yeah, I think for me, just continuing to invest in cash flow, I'm probably going to hold off on multifamily for the time being. I think there's just been a lot going on in that space over the last year or so. Obviously, there's been a lot of foreclosures. I'm curious to see how it's going to end up going out. Right now, I'm just probably going to continue to invest in mortgage notes and triple net lease, and then considering like mobile home parks as well as they typically generate a lot of cash flow, and then also self storage facilities. This one just happened to be a development deal, which is why it's going to be taking a long time to get any sort of return. If it was a typical just a self storage deal, I probably would have gotten paid a lot quicker. I wouldn't have to wait 3 years for my money. But I think this is something you learn over time where do you either want to be a cash flow investor or do you want to be an equity investor? So I think that's something everyone has to consider.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to ask on that note, like thinking about your portfolio and really like, doing your first investment ever, you're like, okay, how's this gonna work? It's
Mhm.
like you could read all the things, see other people do it. Uh, it's a little bit different, especially when you have, you know, uh, that amount of money that not everyone has laying around, right? Even for the first time around, you are doing it. It's like, cool, this isn't going to break the bank, but this isn't like, I can do a bunch of stuff with this 50 grand or 100 grand, right?
Mhm.
And so, what were some of your first concerns before you did your first deal, and how did you kind of work yourself through those concerns?
Yeah, I'd say probably the first concern I had was wiring the money to the wrong spot. I think that I just had to wire the money, just thinking that you're wiring 50K and it just like I know you put the wrong digit in and it just go I don't know what would happen to it. But luckily that hasn't happened yet. But that was my first concern, honestly, was wiring the money to the first location. And then second would be running into it. And you hear about some of these past investors and they've invested in deals that turned out to be Ponzi schemes. There was a deal that I came across as part of the LFI community. Again, I believe it's now called Passive Pockets, but I was talking to a bunch of investors probably about a year and a half ago, and they were talking about a deal where it was this carbon recapture deal. And long story short, you'd get 200% depreciation on your money. And I think the returns looked pretty good. So, in essence, if I put 100K into that deal, I would get to write off 200K. That just didn't seem good. So long story short, that ended up being a Ponzi scheme, but the deal raised like 70, $80 million. So I mean, there was a lot of people that invested capital
Wow.
into this particular deal. So I think that was a worry, was investing in a potential Ponzi scheme. And I think for me, I just had to when I was talking to operators, I just look for something standard. Maybe I'm getting a 8% cash on cash, just looking for a 12 to 15% IRR. When if I'm talking to someone and they say, "Hey, we're gonna get you a 40% IRR on a class A property," I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because 40% IRR means I'm taking on a ton of risk, and a Class A property is going to be your nicest property. If I'm getting a 40%, it's got to be like Class D, or it's got to be like literally building the entire apartment complex,
Yeah.
literally from the ground up, where 12 to 15%, maybe it's a light value add type of project where there's not going to be that much risk on it. So I think it was just making sure I'm investing in these deals that the operator says what they're going to do. And I mean, I would talk to one particular operator comes to mind, and they would be like, "Oh, we give Christmas bonuses out to everyone." I was like, "I don't know, that just sounds it sounds too good to be true." So I don't know if anything ever happened with this particular person, but I'm like, that just sounds too good to be true. I'm gonna hold off investing. So I think the concern was wiring the money to the wrong person, putting my money and a sponsor that to be a Ponzi scheme, and then also losing all my money. Where sometimes you invest with these operators and they're good people, and just these deals don't go good, and then losing all my capital. So for me, it was like I never want to put more than 10% of my net worth in any one particular deal. Where that just if I lose money, then I lose that money, but I wouldn't want to invest like 50% of the money I have to invest in just one person, where in case something happens. So I think that was a big thing for me was I want to make sure that I'm not putting too much money with one particular operator in case something does go wrong. And now and because you hear these horror stories of people that invested 6 different times with one operator, and 5 out of the 6 properties are in foreclosure. Well, that's not really a good place to be, and now you've lost a ton of your money. Like for this triple net lease deal, I reinvested with them, and I reinvested with the mortgage note company, but that was after pretty much 2 years of getting consistent distributions every single month from them. So I felt confident in my investment with them, where maybe I'm dipping a little bit more into the 15 to 20% of the money, or 15 to 20% of my portfolio made up of these companies. But that's because they showed me what they can do. I wasn't just putting the 20% in right from the beginning. So I think it was just had that apprehension of wiring that money over, and then two, like losing out on this money. But I knew that there's enough people out there doing this passive investing that are making money, that are getting a good return, that there's got to be there's got to be good operators, there's got to be good sponsors out there, and realizing that. But yeah, I think that was really the biggest concerns that I had, and just almost not like you're hoping, but you're hoping that all the due diligence that you did, that the vetting, that the background, I would run background checks on the operators, just making sure, looking at their deal, just making sure everything was doing good, and then just at the end of the day, it's almost like a marriage. I'm giving you 50K, and nowadays I'm going to be tied to you to at least 5 or 7 years for the most part, making sure that do I trust you to handle my money for the next 5 to 7 years? So it's definitely a big commitment, but you kind of just have to go through with it, and you can vet all the sponsors, you can vet all the deals. At a certain point, you just have to make that and take that jump into it and take that action to make that first investment.
Yeah, completely. And definitely not from a perspective that's blind, but like you said, go through all that due diligence. And we say due diligence, but I like to break things down into the tactical actionable steps. And so looking at something that you said that I think is really important is that are there people doing this already, right? Are there people buying this product? Are there people starting this business? Like whatever it is, it can really suck to be the first person. So have a look around and be like, does this thing, if anyone is skeptical about doing their first limited partnership, it's like, does this really work? Who
Mhm.
does this? It's like, go do the research of, oh, okay, people are doing this. This is the syndication model. These are how these assets are bought. Okay, cool. I understand that. And then it's like you were talking about and some of the things you did for looking at the sponsors, doing the background checks, getting to know them. What have they done in the past as well? And having an idea of their track record. And I think the thing that many uh, many schools of thought will teach is the look at market, then the sponsor, and then the deal as the last thing in that order, but still understanding the vehicle, passive investing, then looking at market, and then sponsor, and then deal really kind of make a lot of sense. So I love how the first thing you said was making sure that you're wiring the money to the right place. So, yeah, I had that thought too, which is really funny. It's like, oh god, where's this going? Where's this 100K going? So, I want to be respectful of your time here as well. I want to ask, you know, what were if you can go back and you've been doing this for a couple of years, but if you can go back and look at one of the things that you would tell yourself when you're knowing what you know now, right? What would you tell yourself when you were first starting?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing would be to invest quicker, not just take so much time on the
Hmm.
sidelines. I think it took me about a year before I got that first investment and was just betting these deals. I wish I'd just done it a lot earlier in my life and not waited till I was a little bit older. And then I would say outside of that would just be just do pure cash flow plays. That's just me for me personally, where I wish I hadn't gotten into these equity deals where I wish I looked for more cash flow deals. I just my preference, I like cash flow. I like coming in. I like hitting the bank account every
Yeah,
single month pretty much like clockwork. And for me, I just throw it into a high yield savings account and I just have the money grow there as I put more money into the account to get into that next investment. But if I could go back, it would just invest sooner, not be. I would just. And I know I would talk to operators, but talking to so many of them, analyzing so many deals, so it was almost like I wanted it to be the absolute perfect deal before I invested in. And yeah, you want to do your due diligence and make sure you feel comfortable, but it's almost like you don't want to spend all your time analyzing that you never pulled the trigger and invest in one of these deals. And I wish I had just done it. Not that I wanted to do it like a month after learning, but maybe 6 months after learning instead of waiting a year or so.
totally, totally. Yeah, and now like I totally get it. You want to have that certainty, but there's no guarantees in life, probabilities. And so they're
Hmm.
like flipping the like I believe in asking quality questions, a good question. So, for whoever is listening and looking and investing, and the questions are, what do I need to know in order to feel comfortable enough to invest? Right. And
Hmm.
then building like answering that question, getting that own checklist and like, okay, this, and this, and this. Here are the core things. If I have like a list of 20, here are the 10 things that are most important. What do I need to know to do that? And then I can systematically give myself more certainty to invest, right?
Yeah.
And then on topic of building portfolio, cash flow first, 100%, man. Cash flow is absolutely awesome, especially for those that are looking to replace W2 jobs or get their investments. How much money can I get for my money, right?
Mhm.
To have that to live on. So Trevor, pleasure to be here. Thank you for being here. Pleasure to have you. I appreciate it. Any other final words or things you want to mention before you let people know where they can find you?
I would say just the biggest thing is just doing that self education part, listening to podcasts, reading books. That was doing the networking groups, being uncomfortable in the networking groups, not knowing what questions to ask. And if you're someone that's hesitant, just joining those groups, listening to podcasts, reading books. That would be really my best piece of advice for someone to start.
Yeah, just show up, right? You'll hear
Mhm.
the questions people ask. All right. Awesome, man. I will have all of your links and whatnot in the show notes. Is there any place particularly you want to say for people to engage with you?
I would probably say LinkedIn is the best place to engage with me. I love talking to people on LinkedIn and connecting there. And that's pretty simple. That's just my name, Trevor Oldham, on there.
Outstanding. I'll have that in the show notes. Go ahead, talk to Trevor. Trevor, thanks so much for being here, dude. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.